Hello and welcome back to the Waco Tribune-Herald Super Centex Friday Night Lights podcast. I'm Chad Conine along with Trib sports editor Bryce Cherry. How's it going today, Bryce?
Going well. Be going better if the Astros can tie it up tonight.
Yeah, it was kind of painful pretty quick last night, wasn't it? Yeah. You know what? Before we get into any high school football stuff, since you brought that Astros stuff out and you've got Rocket stuff behind you, that old style, good looking Rocket stuff, when they were painting the crowd, and I've seen you wear this logo before, that kind of like broken star logo that the Astros had for about maybe close to a decade, if not more.
Yeah, probably about 15 years.
And the red and black logo of that. And I saw a dude with like a gray jersey with a gold broken star. And I'm just like, man, they have such a good look now and had such a good look in the 80s and 90s. Why would you go back to that? But
well, I mean, I've got some of that gear as well, and will wear it on occasion when my other Astros stuff is probably needing to be laundered. So I get it. Maybe it was laundry day for homeboy.
Yeah, that's how you know it's laundry day at the Cherry household, is they're wearing older, less attractive Astros and Rockets gear.
Yes, this is true. I can promise you I'd have to get pretty deep into the laundry to wear those Rocket pajama uniforms.
Okay, so I'm sitting there watching the World Series game last night, and my mom texts me that my nephew, Eli Cockrell, had a pick six, and they won their first game of the season. He's a seventh grader at Granbury Middle School. And so I texted him, he texted me back. So then I called him. I said, okay, Eli, tell me about the play. What happened? I said, were you playing corner or safety? He said, I was playing safety. And they ran trips on the left side, the far left side from his standpoint. And the inside receiver went in motion from the left to the right. And he said, so I followed him over there. And then they snapped the ball, and the quarterback overthrew this receiver that he was covering right to him. He caught it, had nothing but green in front of him, and went and scored a touchdown.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a self-indulgent intro for me to talk about my nephew and his pick six. But it brings us to a topic. So, like, if you said home run or dunk or a question mark, what's the best moment on a football field? You know, the thing that kind of compares to hitting a home run in baseball.
For me, it's the lateral. Okay. When the lateral comes out, that is when chicanery unfolds, and I am all about chicanery. And it doesn't matter if it's a flea flicker, it doesn't matter if it's an option pitch or like a trick play, but the absolute best series of laterals or at the end of a game where you got nothing else to do but start pitching it around and trying to score. And so recently, I was watching an NFL game, and they pulled off a pretty good flea flicker, and it got me on YouTube watching crazy lateral plays. And I was just like, this is the greatest thing that happens in football. It feels very rugby-like. I probably am a closet rugby fan and don't even know it. But
or if you were born on another continent, you might be a rugby fan.
And obviously, some of the greatest plays in football history, or most memorable, were lateral plays, like Randy Moss's little, kind of no-look pass that he did when he caught a long pass and then pitched it to another guy. Obviously, there's hook and ladders like the Boise State against Oklahoma. But one of the greatest ever was here in Texas about a decade ago. And this is a good tie-in for Central Texas high school football. It was Trinity University down in San Antonio playing some school in Mississippi. And they called it, I think, the Mississippi Miracle. Trinity was down. And I want to still say it's maybe the most number of laterals that have ever worked. It was an insane amount. I think I just pulled it up on Wikipedia. But anyway, I remember after they pulled that off and won the game, I wrote a follow-up story or a column or something because two Central Texas kids were on that Trinity roster that were involved in the laterals. One of them was Brandon Maddox from China Spring, and the other was Josh Hooten, who I believe was an offensive lineman from Robinson. And of course, you know, they were like, you know, we practice this kind of thing, but that was just schoolyard, you know, improv basically. And that's what a lateral kind of is football improv. There's so much that's scripted and you know, you script out the first 15 plays of the game. Once the lateral comes out, all everything's off the page.
Now, it's an interesting direction you took that, right? Because I'm talking about like a big momentum changing play, which that can be, right? But so you took like,
it's the most fun thing in football.
Sure, right? But you took Cal Stanford, like you took like, what's the dunk or home run, right? And you answered with like, what's the Kirk Gibson home run of football?
Yeah, it's Cal Stanford probably. I mean,
yeah.
You know, running over the tuba player. That's just that's an iconic moment.
Right. I wasn't necessarily going for iconic, but it's okay. I'm glad you took it there. It was interesting. You tied it into Central Texas. By the way, is Kirk Gibson's home run the most iconic home run in our lifetimes in baseball?
Wow. It's certainly up there. Joe Carter. I mean, you're talking about winning the World Series on a home run.
Right.
I'll never forget that call. The announcer said, "Touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger one in your life." I mean, that was pretty good.
Right. You know, I really like the pick six as a momentum turner. Football doesn't necessarily lend itself to the dunk or the home run because it's, you know, so many people have to do, you know, when a wide receiver gets open in the secondary or at least has a couple of steps on a guy and they throw the bomb and they score a touchdown that way, that's kind of the same thing, you know. It's kind of that huge breakaway play.
Hail Mary is pretty good. A successful Hail Mary is
Oh
fun.
yeah, I forgot about the Hail Mary. That's a good one too.
And then you know, just you know, within a given play, I love a running back or receiver juking somebody, you know. Obviously you can watch Barry Sanders highlights all day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's transition because this next question is going to take a second, maybe not, I don't know. It's time for a draft, and we've done this before with different in different ways, but let's just do it straight up. We're each going to take three teams. You can take any three teams in our area. In fact, well, I was about to name a couple that I was going to encourage you to take, but there was no reason to be disparaging towards anyone in that way. But we'll each pick three teams, and whoever squad posts the best playoff record wins. Okay.
I like it.
And I don't think I paid you off for the last one, so maybe we're going double or nothing on this one.
Okay.
But you can have the first pick. Who you taking?
All right. So
we're snaking it, by the way, so you better pick good because I get two in a row.
Yeah. Well, I'm still picking good. We've said all year that I feel like there's two teams out there in Central Texas that feel like state championship locks. And I'm gonna take one of those two, and I feel like you're gonna take one of the other two.
Okay.
And I'm gonna start with Live Oak.
Yep.
I feel like they're money this year. It doesn't look like they're gonna be beaten.
Yeah, that was the conventional wisdom first pick for sure. Yeah. So then I'll take Mart. And now it gets tricky, right?
It does.
You know what? You might have mispicked though just now, because how many playoff games does Live Oak have to win the state championship?
True, fewer number. The good thing is I don't feel like I'm going to get a loss. you know, so
Right. Oh, so
I
we're going on winning percentage then.
well, I mean, we can do it however we want, but it's your game, so.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm taking Mart, and then this next pick becomes a little bit more difficult. So you have to ask yourself, who has the chance to go the farthest?
Right.
Right. Gosh, it's a tough one. I think, you know what? I think Abbott would beat a game, would beat Jonesboro in a game. So I'm going to take Abbott because I think they can get further.
So I wrote down 7 schools for this little game.
Yeah.
And I had Live Oak, Mart, Abbott. So,
well,
so I think conventional wisdom is holding true here.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
I thought you would bag me for taking another 6-man school so early, but
I'm trying to win, you know. So are we going chalk or you got it at number 4?
So at number 4, I'm going with the China-Spring-Cougars. I feel like they're playing very, very well, coming off a great playoff run that they should have certainly learned from and hopefully can, replicate. So I feel like Brian Bell's team is destined for a pretty deep playoff run this year. Will they win state? I mean, they got a shot.
I think they're going to play. I think they're going to play in the state championship game in round 4. That's what I think.
In Carthage.
Yeah. Well, not in Carthage, but they'll play Carthage.
In that matchup, China-Spring-Carthage.
Yeah.
So now I get 2 in a row, correct?
Yep. So wait. Yeah. So
this
is your last. This is the last one.
Last
so
pick.
Count.
All right. So I got 3 teams I could choose from here. I could talk them out, but I don't want to. Well, I could talk them out.
It doesn't matter. You know who's good. One, and I get.
Know who's good out there. So I'm choosing between these 3. I'm choosing between West, Jonesboro, who you mentioned earlier, and Lorena. And I think I'll go with the Leopards. Again, a team that is looking pretty strong. Obviously took a couple losses earlier in the year against some pretty good 4A teams. One of the teams they lost to was a 3A team, Franklin, and then they lost to China Spring. But I think Ray Biles's team is peaking in the right direction and really just solid in all phases of the game. I mean, you've gotten to see them play. I mean, don't you think they can make a good run?
Yeah, as much as we've written about their offensive guys, their defense is really good. I mean, Joe Cutshall just took a running back and just tossed him to the ground the other day. It was like, that's not a penalty, but it feels like it should be.
Yeah, that's like man against boy stuff.
Yeah. So my third pick, this is my third team, right? I didn't think of this one like right off the bat. And for some reason, they weren't on your list, but I'm not finding fault with it. But I think I'm getting a really good third pick in the Crawford-Pirates.
Yes, and actually, that was a team I did consider. I just when I got to 7, I was like, I'm not going to have to pick beyond that.
Right.
And honestly, in hindsight, I think Crawford can probably go deeper than West. But I haven't broken down those brackets and looked ahead. But Crawford coming off a state semifinal, year. Obviously, they did lose some pretty good seniors off that team, but again, playing very, very well and haven't lost.
Yeah, and that's one I have not got to see play yet this year. But I have a feeling I will before it's all said and done. They've got I don't know how many of the last 10 Thanksgivings I've seen Crawford play a football game, but
yeah, you could probably chalk that up right now if you want to. I mean, that would be
right.
They'll be
Yeah.
playing. They'll be playing
Yeah.
Thanksgiving week.
They'll be playing somewhere. Well, before we get to the playoffs, we still got 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. I told you I'm going to switch up our usual routine, and I'm going to do our playoff scenario column for Friday this week. Just I feel like I think last week I even said to myself, this is too late in the game to do this. This is not interesting. You know, it's all decided, right? So we're gonna have a lot of clinching going on Friday night. You know, like we're gonna be like clinching like a group of people that went to Mexico and drank the water. You know.
Yikes! That was just inappropriate. And that's clinching, not clinching. Two different verbs. Here on our grammar podcast.
This is way off topic, but I don't care. I heard somewhere, I think it was actually on the Office Ladies podcast, that once upon a time, leading psychologists believed that the overuse of puns was an indication of insanity.
Well, to be fair to those of us who might be prone to puns,
pun prone,
not all those insane people. Maybe this is right, because you probably have to be insane to work in newspapers and write headlines for a living and that kind of thing, because puns work in headlines.
Right. And maybe I started thinking about that. Maybe that's where the no pun intended phrase came from. You know, it's like
you're trying to say, look, I'm not crazy.
Right. Exactly.
I realize this sounds cheesy, but I'm going to say it anyway. No pun intended.
So, boy, we veered off topic there hard. But we've both covered high school football for a long time, since before 4 teams made the playoffs. I remember I was maybe might have been a sophomore or junior in college when they went from 2 to 3 teams. You might have been early on at the Trib or at the Brenham newspaper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when that was, but that sounds about right. That maybe late 90s.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I started at the Trib in 98, so is somewhere in that vicinity.
I just remember thinking a few years after I graduated that, man, well, that's just a, hand out playoff trips if you're going to let 3 teams go. But do you think, do you feel how it's changed it's obviously changed the landscape. There's no question about that. But do you sense ways in which it's changed the landscape when we get to, week 10 out of 11-week regular season like we are right now?
Yeah, I do think it has sucked a little of the drama out of the end of the regular season, which is unfortunate, because I appreciate essentially that early start to the playoffs, which is basically play-in games for the playoffs. Basically you got 2 teams coming down to the wire, and the winner makes the playoffs, the loser goes home. We still have those games, but is it as dramatic when it's for 4th place? I don't think so. I agree with you. I remember when we went from 2 to 3. I think it was around that time that we talked about, and I remember our good friend David G. Campbell, who used to work at the Trib and in College Station for a long time. He was one of those sort of old school guys that was like, oh my gosh, 3 teams? Are you kidding? Really railing against it a little bit. And in hindsight, now I feel like 3 is sort of a good compromise. Let's go back to 3, because 4 really does feel like too many in a lot of cases, because especially when you have 5 and 6 team districts where 4 teams make the playoffs. It's just like, well, you're basically letting everybody in. You get a lot of 3 and 7 playoff teams, and is that good for anyone? And when they opened it up really to 2A and up, all have 4 teams making the playoffs. It was like, yikes, because some of those lower levels, if you're a 4th place 2A team, you can have some pretty bad teams making the playoffs. And it doesn't really matter what level it is. I mean, a lot of times those 4th place teams aren't very good. Now, there are districts where that is the exception. And you have stacked districts. I mean, that's always going to happen. But I think more often than not, you get a lot of really lopsided 1 versus 4 matchups in the bi-district round.
Yeah, I think potentially our best 4th place playoff team this year might be like the Hamilton Bulldogs or somebody like that. You mentioned on Friday, one of the things I found last night is that Mejia won 1 game, is playing Bullard, who has won 0 games. And the winner of that game in that 5-team district is going to the playoffs, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and I believe there was a district in Houston a year or 2 ago where an 0-10 team got into the playoffs. And I mean, that's just the most baffling thing ever. But it was a case of, I think one of the other teams in the district had to call it season for some reason or whatever. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, it was a big story because it was like, oh, they were the shining example of what's wrong with high school football. And obviously I think they were sheepish and sort of embarrassed about the whole thing too. It was like, look, we realize we're not very good, but what are we supposed to do?
Like, yeah, you're out the door on the way to basketball practice and they say, hold on, come back. Well, in my column that I write for Friday, and I started to work out some of the things, and I've decided some of these games, instead of calling them, for a playoff berth, I'm kind of put a little bit of a negative spin on it and say they're elimination games.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, you can call them play-in games, you can call them elimination games, pre-playoff games. Anytime essentially you're playing for a spot. I mean, one team's going home, one team's moving on. And so elimination game is totally fair. That's all a playoff game really is one elimination game after another.
Well, and that brings us back to a point that I always make when people talk about 4 teams in the playoffs and they try to talk about that it's ruined high school football. And, I don't think it has, but here's the thing. That second week of the playoffs is as if only 2 teams made the playoffs, Correct.
And when you get into the second week and beyond, you do not have to look far for great matchups. And you and I have said it for years. Once you get to Thanksgiving week, I don't care what level you're on, 1A through 6A, if you've gotten to Thanksgiving week, you have done something. You've had a good season.
Well, and like Shane Anderson at Connolly, put that as one of his main goals.
He put it as a goal for Midway this year. They had, goal A, goal B, goal 3, and one of the things was practice on Thanksgiving. And I'll never forget Cooper, my son, who's a junior at Midway. We were talking about Thanksgiving plans at one point, and he goes, "Well, we're I think supposed to be like practicing that week, Dad." And I said, "No, son, no, you're not." I I say you realize that is not only in the playoffs, that's a few weeks into the playoffs. Okay.
Hey, Midway still got that in front of them. You know, if they could beat Cedar Hill Friday night, then beat Legacy, Legacy? Lake Ridge. They still need some help, but
wow, I can't believe I can't believe it's still a mathematical possibility.
What they need is to beat Cedar Hill and have Mansfield tank.
Okay. So it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask.
It's a lot to ask. And I'm not going to lose much sleep over it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a likely scenario. And, you know, let's just face it. I think we've talked about it before on the pod, but Shane Anderson had a tough job coming in here midsummer and, you know, trying to lead them to the playoffs in this district this year with the talent he had. I mean, he was behind the 8 ball from the moment he got there because, you know, he's having to install everything on the fly. So.
Yeah, well, I keep telling people when they ask me about Midway, which people either ask me about Midway or they ask me about Texas Tech football. And so I talk a lot about those things. Midway's got 2 things that it's got to not get right, but just 2 things need to happen for Midway between now and next fall. And this is the same for Waco-High too. Maybe the same for University, maybe all 3 of them. Every kid that stays in the program, and maybe they need to make it hard enough to where not every kid stays in the program, you know, just in terms of work and getting better. But every kid in the program that suits up next August for preseason practice has to get 10 to 20% better, you know?
Yeah. And I know that last fall, after Midway's first year in 11-6A with Duncanville and DeSoto and all these teams, that really was an emphasis among the old coaching staff led by Jeff Hume, was that they were like, look, guys, what we did this year, that's not going to cut it in this district. And, but I mean, you can work and you can work and you can work, but are you going to grow 6 inches? Are you going to get half a second faster? I mean,
well, you know, I don't know that, given that they were going to be playing in the same district, I don't want to be too critical, but I think there might have been kind of a lack of motivation among some of the Midway returning players in the last off season. Now, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. I'm sure some kids worked really hard, so I won't go any further into that. But the other thing, besides everybody in the program getting 10 to 20% better between now and next year, and like I said, this goes from Midway, Waco-High, University, pretty much any team that didn't want to have the season that they had, you know, that is that. The other thing is that they need to be in a different district, or hope to be in a different district, you know. And it looks like Waco-High is going to be, what I'm hearing is that Waco-High might even go down to 5A D2.
Wow. It's a big drop. I mean, they were only 6A by 3 students, and we've covered that before. So I think they're pretty much guaranteed to be in one of those 2 5A divisions. But wow, I didn't know they had dropped quite that far. We'll be, of course, talking more realignment as we go forward. You know, those numbers will start popping up, and we'll have, you know, some talk about that. But yes, I think there's a pretty good likelihood that Waco-High, Midway are both in different districts next year, different classifications. I think Midway will probably end up in a familiar spot back with Belton and Temple, and you know, although I think Belton may be going down to 5A, so Midway may be taking Belton's spot in that old district.
But Temple and Bryan and the Killeen schools.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, there's no end of stuff to talk about.
But there is an end to the podcast.
There is an end to the podcast. So we'll see you next week.
All right.